When the local bully towered over my 75-year-old mother, striking her to the floor of her own diner, he laughed as if he owned our small town. No one dared step in. They all knew his name, his money, and his reputation for crushing anyone who crossed him. He stood there smirking, completely confident that a defenseless elderly woman had no one left to protect her. But his smug grin vanished seconds later when the front glass door clicked open. He didn't realize that the woman he just attacked wasn't alone in this world, and he certainly had no idea that I was an active lieutenant colonel commanding a unit of elite Army Rangers who had just pulled up outside. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. Here is how one arrogance-fueled mistake cost a town tyrant everything. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Nicole Turner. At 38 years old, I've spent nearly half my life in uniform, learning that real strength isn't about making noise. It's about having the discipline to stay calm when everything around you is falling apart. As an active commander in the United States Army leading a unit of elite Rangers, my job has taken me to some of the most unforgiving places on Earth. I've faced high-stress tactical operations, managed dangerous conflicts, and earned the respect of soldiers who trust me with their lives. But no matter where the military sent me, my anchor was always back home in a small, quiet town where everyone knew everyone. And at the heart of that home was my mother, Evelyn. Evelyn was 75 years old, a woman whose entire life was built on warmth, hard work, and selflessness. After my father passed away over a decade ago, she threw her heart into running the family roadside diner, a cozy, worn-down little place where the coffee was always hot and the doors were always open to anyone needing a warm meal. When I finally earned a short stretch of leave, all I wanted was to strip off the heavy weight of command for a few days, hug my mother, and sit at her counter like I used to as a kid. I had brought a few off-duty members of my unit along to show them my hometown. What none of us expected was that my peaceful homecoming was about to turn into a battleground. For over 40 years, my mother's diner wasn't just a place to eat, it was the beating heart of our community. Farmers, truckers, and local families gathered there every morning. After my father passed, running the diner became Evelyn's way of keeping his memory alive. She poured every ounce of her strength into those four walls, serving people with a smile even when her own joints burned with age. But 6 months before my return, a shadow fell over our town in the form of Vance Vance. Vance was a wealthy, ruthless land developer who had built an empire by buying up local properties for cheap and leveling them to build commercial complexes. He didn't build through fair deals. He built through intimidation, predatory offers, and corrupt local influence. Everyone in town feared him because he made it clear that anyone who stood in his way would be ruined. And Vance had set his sights squarely on my mother's property. Because the diner sat on a prime corner lot right at the edge of the main highway, Vance saw it as the missing piece for his multi-million-dollar development project. He started coming in with low-ball cash offers, which my mother politely declined every single time. To her, that land wasn't for sale at any price. It was her home, her husband's legacy, and her life's work. But Vance wasn't used to hearing the word no, and his polite inquiries quickly turned into aggressive daily threats. The afternoon sun was just beginning to dip as my squad's truck pulled into the diner's gravel parking lot. We had stopped to grab dinner, and I was looking forward to seeing the surprised look on my mother's face when I walked through the door. But as I swung my legs out of the vehicle, a strange silence hung over the diner. Normally, you could hear light chatter and clinking cutlery from the parking lot, but today, something felt dead wrong. Stepping up to the porch, I glanced through the front glass window, and my blood immediately ran cold. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. Half a dozen local patrons sat frozen in their booths, staring at the floor in terrified silence. Standing near the counter was a man in a tailored suit, Vance Vance, surrounded by two muscular security guards. Vance was leaning over the Formica counter, his face flushed with rage as he shouted down my mother. "You stubborn old fool!" Vance snarled, his voice echoing off the walls. "You're signing this property transfer today, or I will make sure you don't have a roof over your head by tomorrow." My 75-year-old mother stood behind the counter, trembling, but her chin remained held high. "I told you, Mr. Vance. This land is not for sale. Please leave my diner." Vance's eyes snapped, infuriated that a fragile elderly woman refused to submit to his authority. His control snapped completely. In a flash of unbridled rage, he raised his open hand and struck my mother violently across the face. The crack resonated through the room. Evelyn gasped, lost her footing, and collapsed hard onto the floor behind the counter, out of sight. Vance stood over the counter, laughing a cruel, booming laugh as he looked at the terrified patrons. "Anybody else want to tell me no?" The heavy glass door clicked open, and the bell above it chimed softly into the dead silence of the diner. I stepped over the threshold, my squad following close behind me. I was dressed in civilian clothes, simple boots and tactical fatigue pants, looking like any ordinary traveler. But the moment my eyes locked onto my mother lying bruised on the tile floor behind the counter, something switched deep inside me. Years of tactical military training instantly compressed my anger into a dangerous, icy focus. I walked straight past the frozen patrons and stood 10 feet from Vance, my voice deadly calm. "Step away from the counter." Vance slowly turned around, adjusting the cuffs of his expensive suit. He looked me up and down with a sneer, completely failing to recognize the commanding presence standing before him. To him, I was just a heartbroken daughter making a foolish mistake. "And who the hell are you supposed to be?" Vance asked, a cruel smirk creeping back onto his lips. "Her little rescue party?" "I'm her daughter," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, yet carrying an authority that made his two hired guards shift uncomfortably. "And you're going to step away from my mother right now." Vance threw his head back and laughed, throwing his arms out as if he owned the room. "Listen to me, little girl. You have no idea how things work in this town. I run this county. The mayor, the sheriff, the judges. They're all in my pocket. Your old lady made a bad business decision and now she's paying for it. You take one more step toward me, and I'll make sure both of you end up in a cell by tonight." He stepped closer, towering over me, utterly convinced he had the upper hand. He had no idea he was standing in front of a storm. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I simply moved past Vance as if he were invisible, kneeling down behind the counter to check on my mother. Her lip was bleeding, and her cheek was already beginning to swell, but her eyes opened and focused on me. "Nicole," she whispered weakly. "I've got you, Mom," I said gently, helping her up into a sturdy chair. "You're safe now." I turned back around, standing tall and locking eyes with Vance. His expression grew impatient. "Are you deaf, girl? I told you to get out of my face before I have my men remove you." Before Vance's security guards could take a single step forward, the 3 off-duty soldiers who had walked in with me moved into formation. They didn't draw weapons, nor did they utter a word. They simply positioned themselves with the quiet, terrifying efficiency of men trained for combat, instantly shutting down every exit and blocking Vance's guards. The air in the diner turned ice cold. Vance's guards immediately halted, their instincts telling them that the men standing in front of them were not ordinary locals. "What is this?" Vance spat, a crack finally appearing in his arrogant facade. "Who do you think you are?" I reached into my pocket, pulled out my official military identification credentials, and flipped them open right in front of his face. "My name is Lieutenant Colonel Nicole Turner," I said, my voice cutting through the room like steel. "United States Army Rangers. The woman you just assaulted is a military dependent, and this property is under federal reporting protections. And while you were busy boasting about owning the local sheriff, My team already dialed the state police and the military police corps. They're pulling up outside right now. Vance's face drained of every ounce of color. Outside, red and blue strobe lights began flashing against the diner windows as state trooper cruisers and military police vehicles screeched to a halt in the parking lot. The loud wail of sirens signaled that Vance's reign of local terror was officially at its end. Within seconds, armed officers flooded into the diner. The lead state trooper took one look at my military ID, recognized my rank, and then saw my mother nursing her swollen cheek behind the counter. The atmosphere shifted from a local dispute to a high-priority criminal investigation in a heartbeat. Vance opened his mouth, trying frantically to regain control. "Officer, listen to me. This is all a massive misunderstanding. I'm Vance. I practically fund this town. These people threatened me." "Shut your mouth, Vance," the trooper snapped, stepping up and grabbing Vance's arms. "We've got a room full of witnesses and you just struck a 75-year-old woman." As the steel handcuffs clicked around Vance's wrists, his arrogant demeanor completely shattered. He began stammering, sweating profusely, and begging his security guards to call his high-priced lawyers. But it was far too late. What Vance didn't realize was that striking my mother opened the floodgates. With state authorities on the scene and federal officers documenting the incident, the local corrupt shield he relied on dissolved instantly. Within 48 hours, the state attorney general launched a full investigation into Vance's business dealings. Investigators uncovered a massive web of extortion, unlawful land grabs, and financial coercion that he had used to bully small business owners for years. The man who thought he owned the town was facing felony assault charges, extortion indictments, and millions in civil lawsuits. He was led out of the diner in shame, completely ruined by his own unstoppable greed. 2 months after that fateful afternoon, the morning sun shone brightly through the sparkling clean windows of the diner. The smell of fresh coffee and buttered toast filled the air once again, accompanied by the familiar, comforting hum of happy chatter. With Vance behind bars awaiting trial and his real estate network dismantled, the shadow that had hung over our small town was finally gone. Several other local family business owners who had been threatened by Vance came forward to share their stories, inspired by the fact that someone had finally stood up to him and won. My mother's face was fully healed, and though she was 75, her spirit was brighter than ever. Sitting behind the counter, she greeted every regular customer with the same warm smile she had given them for 40 years. When my leave ended and it was time for me to return to base, I knew she was safe, surrounded by a community that loved her and protected by the legacy we had fought to keep intact. Serving as an Army Ranger taught me that power isn't meant to dominate the weak. It's meant to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Bullies like Vance rely on fear, assuming their victims are isolated and defenseless. But when ordinary people stand together with courage and honor, even the most arrogant tyrants will fall. I want to thank every single one of you for taking the time to listen to my story today. If you enjoyed this video and found it satisfying, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this. Drop a comment below with your thoughts and tell me, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Until next time, stay safe and stand strong.